Prince Harry became the first royal in a century to take the stand and testify in a court in his lawsuit against publishers of British tabloids for allegedly hacking his phone and other unlawful activities. It's day 2 of that hearing in the UK court, but let me tell you what Prince Harry told the court yesterday. He claimed that thousands of articles have been written about him that contributed to a general effect which played a destructive role during his childhood and adolescence. He accused some journalists of having blood on their hands as well. In the conclusion of his witness statement, Prince Harry criticized the state of British journalism. He claimed that British journalism had hit rock bottom. He also spoke about how the British state, had failed him as well. We are going to be seeing more such comments come to the fore as far as the courtroom testimony goes. Sanjay, my colleague, continues to be with us. Sanjay, this hearing could go on through Thursday as well, is what we're learning. But what happens next?
Well, we are going to have a continuing cross-examination of Harry. And this cross-examination is, if you like, coming at cross purposes. Harry is taking the broad moralistic position as he sees it. He is speaking of intrusion. He is speaking of the effects it had on the family. And there will be some sympathy, without doubt, for what he says if there has been an intrusion that has affected lifestyle to the extent that it broke up a relationship with his girlfriend. It broke up a lot of relationships with him, with his friends in school. It compromised family relationships. Clearly, there is some sympathy for this, but that is not the issue before the court. The issue is whether hacking took place. On that, the evidence is not very strong, either by way of allegations from Harry or even on the other side of defense from the Mirror Group. The Mirror Group has been saying that, well, it only reported what other newspapers had been reporting, which is not the proudest kind of defense for any publication or any news outlet to offer. But the Mirror Group is now under some pressure from Harry that it should put journalists into the dock for them to now explain where they got the information from. Their defense is they got it from sources. His accusation is they got it through hacking. The answer really lies with the journalists, but the journalists have not been testifying and they have not been asked to testify.
Now, Sanjay, this is a test case, so to say, because there are several other complainants as well, about hundreds of them who've made similar allegations, but this is being heard first because it's seen as a test case or so. When this particular hearing ends, are we going to be seeing other complainants take the stand as well? The hearing, perhaps another session, another part of it, so to say, would begin?
Well, you're quite right to say that this has been agreed as a test case among a number of people who claim to have been affected similarly. So what they will do next will depend upon the outcome in this case. Clearly, we can see a situation that if Harry were to win this, they would be very much more confident in pressing their charges and they would get a little more aggressive in court and bring their matters to court. A lot will depend upon the evidence that surfaces of hacking. We know from allegations made on behalf of Harry that a number of these Mirror journalists were in contact with the private investigator, and that private investigator had access to telephones and used information that was potentially available only through hacking. But we are not very clear whether that indeed did take place. We are a little short of evidence on this. We have need technological evidence of hacking, witness evidence, and other facts that can support this claim. If those facts were to be forthcoming, and if evidence were to surface that hacking has been taking place, and that this private investigator and others that the Mirror journalists worked with potentially worked on other stories as well, then certainly those other charges will be pressed very forcefully.
Absolutely. It will be interesting to see where this case goes, not just for Prince Harry, but for the rest of the complainants as well. Sanjay, for the moment, thank you so much for getting us the latest and putting that in perspective. But it is a saga that has been dragging on for months in this particular hearing, but for decades together as far as Prince Harry is concerned, like he told the court yesterday as well. Here's a roundup of all that's transpired so far.
Prince Harry launched a fierce attack on what he called the vile press as he gave evidence against a tabloid publisher on Tuesday. It's the first time a senior British royal has been in the witness box since the 1890s. He blames tabloids for destroying his adolescence, as he gave evidence against tabloid publisher Harry and 100 others accused the publisher of the Daily Mirror of widespread phone hacking and unlawful information gathering between 1991 and 2011. The Prince faces hours of cross-examination from MGN's lawyer Andrew Green over 33 newspaper articles whose details, he says, were obtained unlawfully. Green began by personally apologising to Harry on MGN's behalf over one instance in which it admitted unlawful information gathering. In his written witness statement, Harry denounced the treatment he'd experienced at the hands of the press, saying he'd been labelled a playboy prince and a failure. He said the press would try to destroy his relationships with girlfriends, blaming them for causing his circle of friends to shrink and leading to bouts of depression and paranoia. In another section of the statement, he said, quote, "How much more blood will stain their typing fingers before someone can put a stop to this madness?" Asked by Green if he was suggesting by this that MGN journalists who wrote the articles at the centre of his lawsuit had blood on their hands, Harry replied, "Some of the editors and journalists that are responsible for causing a lot of pain, upset, and in some cases, perhaps inadvertently, death." Harry said thousands, if not millions, of stories had been written about him as Green pressed him on whether he'd read the Mirror Group articles in question at the time they were published. The 7-week MGN trial began last month. About 20 members of the public queued to gain access to one of around a dozen seats available to the public inside the courtroom. MGN has previously admitted its titles were involved in phone hacking, settling more than 600 claims, but Green has said there was no evidence that Harry had ever been a victim.